The Galactic Military Academy of Vortex Prime stood like a gleaming monument to interstellar superiority, its twisting spires and geometric architecture visible from 3 planetary bodies away. Not that anyone needed the visual reminder. Every sentient species within the consolidated systems knew the Academy produced the finest military minds in 13 galaxies. Well, except for those backwater planets that hadn't figured out faster than light travel yet. Poor suckers. Cadet Jax Lorne adjusted his uniform for the 17th time that morning, his 4 slender fingers struggling with the magnetic clasps that never seemed to line up right. His pale blue skin had taken on a slightly darker hue around his neck, the Zenthari equivalent of a stress blush. "Would you stop fidgeting? You look like a Quasirian eel in a salt bath," whispered Prell, his bunkmate and fellow third-year cadet. Prell's species had evolved from something resembling Earth's octopi, though no one would dare point that out. His skin rippled with yellow annoyance patterns. "Easy for you to say," Jax Lorne muttered. "You've already passed Captain Desaria's class. I heard she made a cadet drink liquid nitrogen last term when he couldn't name all 7 battle formations of the Andromedan hive." Prell's eye stalk swiveled in amusement. "That's just a rumor. She only made him hold it in his mouth for 10 seconds. The classroom door slid open with a theatrical hiss, and 34 spines of various anatomical designs suddenly straightened. Captain Desaria entered with the practiced precision of someone who knew exactly how much fear her footsteps should induce. Unlike most Krivlaxians who stood around 7 feet tall, Captain Desaria towered at nearly 9. Her exoskeleton gleamed with military-grade polish, and the ceremonial daggers strapped to her 4 arms weren't just for show. She'd earned them in the Rigelian conflicts, where she'd reportedly taken down an entire enemy battalion with nothing but those blades and apparently a really bad mood. "Sentience," she began, her voice like gravel being crushed by larger, angrier gravel. "Welcome to Tactical History of Lesser Species. I see by your faces and other sensory appendages that you've heard the rumors. Yes, this class has the highest dropout rate in the Academy. Yes, I take personal pride in that statistic." She activated the holographic display at the center of the room. A small blue and green planet rotated slowly. "This term, we're adding a new species to our study. Planet designation, Earth. Species, human. Technological advancement, laughable. Military threat assessment, negligible." Her mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "These creatures haven't even colonized their own moon permanently, despite landing on it centuries ago." Jax Lorne raised a hesitant finger. Captain Desaria's compound eyes swiveled toward him with predatory focus. "Question, Cadet Lorne? Or should I just call you future dropout?" A nervous titter rippled through the classroom. "If they're so primitive, ma'am, why are we studying them at all?" The captain's exoskeleton creaked as she leaned forward. "Excellent question. Perhaps you'll survive the week after all." She expanded the hologram, zooming in on various regions of Earth. The Galactic Council recently intercepted some of their communications and military footage. The preliminary analysis was interesting enough to warrant closer study. She straightened up, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Sometimes, Cadet Lorne, the most dangerous predators aren't the ones with the sharpest teeth or the most advanced technology. Sometimes they're the ones with nothing to lose and everything to prove. The Academy believes in being prepared for all possible threats, no matter how unlikely." The way she said unlikely made Jax Lorne's spine ridges quiver. This was supposed to be an easy credit, a joke class about primitive species that couldn't even achieve stable antimatter containment. So why did Captain Desaria sound almost respectful? "Now," she continued, her tone shifting to something approaching enthusiasm, which was somehow more terrifying, "let's begin with basic human physiology. Note the complete lack of natural armor, secondary limbs, or redundant organs. Pathetic, really." Jax Lorne settled into his seat, already dreading whatever homework would come from this class. If Captain Desaria found these humans interesting, they couldn't be as harmless as they appeared. Your assignment, Captain Desaria announced as the first-class session drew to a close, is to analyze 15 standard hours of human combat footage. I want a full breakdown of their tactics, weaknesses, and psychological patterns. She paused, her mandibles clicking in what might have been a smile. And to make it interesting, the team with the most insightful analysis won't have to participate in next week's toxic atmosphere survival drill. A murmur of excitement rippled through the classroom. Nobody wanted to do the toxic atmosphere drill. Last year, 3 cadets had dissolved. Dismissed, Captain Desaria barked, and 34 alien cadets scrambled to their various appendages. Outside the classroom, Jack Slorn let out a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. 15 hours of watching primitive monkeys throw rocks at each other? Kill me now. It could be worse, said Prell, his tentacles gesturing philosophically. Remember the Gulbarian digestive system exam? Jack Slorn shuddered. Fair point. Hey, you two planning a study group for the human project? A melodic voice floated down the corridor. Tara Quinn approached, her crystalline body refracting the hallway lights into dazzling patterns. As a Lumidian, she was essentially a sentient crystal formation with remarkable analytical abilities and the most beautiful harmonics when she spoke. Behind her lumbered Nivex, a draconian exchange student whose scale-covered body seemed too massive for the Academy's standardized corridors. Steam occasionally puffed from his nostrils when he laughed, which he did now. Primitive humans? This assignment is an insult to our intelligence, Nivex rumbled. My ancestor could have eaten an entire human village for breakfast. That's why we need to work together, Tara Quinn's voice chimed. Captain Desaria never gives easy assignments. There must be more to these humans than we're seeing. Jack Slorn nodded reluctantly. Archive room after final meal? 3 hours later, the 4 cadets gathered in the vast Academy archives. The room hummed with quantum servers storing the collective military knowledge of thousands of civilizations. Their small study pod isolated them from the others, scattered throughout the cavernous space. Access Earth, military history, visual records, Jack Slorn commanded. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a categorized timeline of human conflicts. By the 7 moons, breathed Nivex. They've had hundreds of wars? On one planet? Must be a cataloging error, Prell suggested, his tentacles dancing across the interface. Let me cross-reference. No, that's accurate. These creatures have been killing each other since they figured out how to sharpen sticks. Tara Quinn's crystalline form dimmed slightly. That's concerning. Or pathetic, Jack Slorn countered. Look at this one labeled World War I. They're fighting in dirt trenches, actual dirt, with chemical propellant weapons that aren't even laser-guided. The display showed grainy black and white footage of human soldiers huddled in muddy trenches, occasionally climbing over the top to charge across open ground. Those uniforms aren't even atmosphere-sealed, Nivex snorted, sending twin plumes of steam into the air. And where are their exoskeletons? Their secondary defense systems? They don't have any, Prell noted, scanning the accompanying data. Humans have no natural armor, no backup organs, and only one brain. Honestly, it's amazing they survived long enough to develop rudimentary spaceflight. Jack Slorn leaned back, his neck ridges relaxing. This is going to be easier than I thought. These bipeds are a joke. They haven't even figured out how to harness dark energy, and Captain Desaria wants us to analyze them as a potential threat. He gestured grandly at the display. Computer, show us their most advanced weapons technology. The hologram shifted to display what the Academy's database labeled as thermonuclear weapons. Fusion bombs. Nivex laughed so hard that the study pod's temperature regulation system activated. They're still using controlled atomic reactions? My species outgrew that technology before we'd even achieved unified planetary government. Let's just get through these 15 hours quickly, Jax Lorne said, settling in. I'll create a standard threat assessment template. Prel, you document their weapons. Nivex, focus on their physical capabilities. Tara Quinn, you're best at psychological analysis. This will be the easiest assignment of the term, Nivex declared. Watch some primitive bipeds fumble around with outdated technology, write a report saying they're harmless, and skip the toxic atmosphere drill. Tara Quinn's crystalline body pulsed with uncertain light. I don't know, something about this doesn't feel right. Captain Desaria isn't known for easy assignments. You worry too much, Jax Lorne said, starting the first video file. What could possibly be threatening about hairless primates who still use fossil fuels? The screen filled with footage labeled Battle of Stalingrad, 1942 to 1943, and the four cadets settled in for what they assumed would be 15 hours of academic boredom. 2 hours into the Battle of Stalingrad footage, the casual mockery had faded into uncomfortable silence. The four cadets watched as humans fought house to house, room to room, in temperatures cold enough to freeze their primitive weapons. They're still fighting, Nivex finally said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. Look at that thermometer reading. That's cold enough to put my species into hibernation, and these humans are still fighting. Jax Lorne's neck ridges had darkened considerably. Computer, give me casualty statistics for this battle. The AI responded promptly, estimated total casualties for the Battle of Stalingrad, approximately 2 million military and civilian deaths. 2 million? Prel's tentacles curled in distress. That can't be right. That's more than the entire population of the Zenthari home system. In one battle, Tara Quinn added, her crystalline form pulsing with a troubled orange hue. Computer, how many total casualties for this World War II conflict? Estimated total casualties for World War II between 70 and 85 million military and civilian deaths. The four cadets stared at each other in stunned silence. That's not possible, Jax Lorne finally managed. Their global population couldn't have survived that level of loss. Global population at the start of World War II was approximately 2.3 billion, the computer supplied helpfully. Casualties represented approximately 3% of the world population. Nivex's scales had paled to a sickly gray. They just kept going? After losing that many of their species? The computer advanced to the next major conflict, Prel instructed, his voice strained. The display shifted to the Korean War, then Vietnam, then a sequence of Middle Eastern conflicts. The cadets watched in growing horror as the weapons evolved, but the intensity of the fighting never diminished. Those soldiers in Vietnam. Tara Quinn observed, her voice a discordant tone that indicated distress. They're fighting in swamp conditions, with parasites, diseases, and predators all around them. And look, that's a primitive chemical weapon. They call it napalm. It adheres to their skin and continues burning. Why wouldn't they surrender? Prel wondered aloud. Their odds of survival are mathematically untenable. They watched footage of a human soldier, badly wounded, continuing to fire his weapon while dragging an injured comrade to safety. I don't understand, Jax Lorne said, genuinely perplexed. By Academy tactical doctrine, the correct action would be to retreat and preserve combat effectiveness. This behavior is irrational. The computer automatically advanced to a new conflict, something called Desert Storm. The screen filled with night vision footage of explosions lighting up a darkened city. Wait, Nivex rumbled, leaning forward. These are precision strikes. Look at how they're targeting military installations while attempting to minimize civilian casualties. That doesn't make sense, Jax Lorne argued. In the previous wars, they showed no such restraint. Why change tactics? It's not just a tactical change, Tara Quinn's voice resonated thoughtfully. It's an ethical evolution. They're learning, adapting their warfare to match their changing values. Computer, show most recent major conflicts, Prell requested. The display shifted again, showing special forces operations, urban warfare, and counterinsurgency tactics. These soldiers, Nivex observed, pointing at footage of a squad moving through a building, they're checking every room before firing. They're confirming targets are combatants. But that decreases their survival probability by 23%, Jax Lorne objected. Why would they risk their lives to avoid killing non-combatants? It's tactically unsound. The room fell silent again as they continued watching. A human soldier threw himself onto what the computer identified as a grenade to save his comrades. That's deliberate self-termination to save others, Prell whispered, his tentacles perfectly still for once. I've never seen any species do that except in defense of their own offspring. We should watch more, Tara Quinn suggested, her color now a deep, contemplative blue. I think we're missing something fundamental about these humans. Jax Lorne nodded slowly, a creeping unease settling in his gut. Computer, show us their training methods. How do they create soldiers willing to do this? As the display changed to show human military training footage, Jax Lorne exchanged worried glances with his fellow cadets. Their initial mockery felt not just misplaced now, but somehow shameful. These weren't the actions of primitive bipeds fumbling with outdated technology. This was something else entirely. Does anyone else feel like Captain Desaria knew exactly what she was doing when she assigned us this footage? Jax Lorne asked quietly. No one answered. They didn't need to. Computer, define guerrilla warfare, Jax Lorne requested, his voice tight with tension. Guerrilla warfare, a form of irregular warfare in which small groups of combatants, such as paramilitary personnel, armed civilians, or irregulars, use military tactics including ambushes, sabotage, raids, petty warfare, hit-and-run tactics, and mobility to fight a larger and less mobile traditional military. Prell's tentacles writhed in agitation. So they deliberately engage superior forces? That's suicide by any rational military doctrine. And yet, Nivex rumbled, gesturing at the display showing Vietnamese fighters emerging from underground tunnels to attack much better-equipped American soldiers, and it appears to be effective. The footage shifted to what the database identified as the Afghan Mujahideen fighting against Soviet forces. Look at their weapons, Tara Quinn noted, her crystalline form pulsing with rapid flashes of concern. They're using significantly inferior technology against a superpower, and they're winning? This violates every tactical principle we've studied, Jax Lorne said, his neck ridges now almost black with stress. Inferior forces are supposed to surrender when outmatched. It conserves resources and population. That's just logical. Computer, show more examples of human guerrilla warfare throughout history, Nivex commanded. For the next hour, the cadets watched in growing horror as humans repeatedly demonstrated their willingness to fight against overwhelming odds. American revolutionaries against the British Empire, Spanish resistance against Napoleon, Filipino insurgents against Japanese occupation, French resistance against Nazi Germany. They never stop, Prell whispered. Even when defeated, when their cities are leveled, when victory is mathematically impossible, they just keep fighting. Computer, show footage of the Battle of Thermopylae, Tara Quinn requested, reading from the historical index. The display changed to a documentary recreation of ancient Greek soldiers in a narrow mountain pass. 300 warriors, Jax Lorne read from the data screen, deliberately stayed behind to fight against an army of over 100,000, knowing they would die. But why? Nivex demanded, smoke curling from his nostrils in distress. What tactical advantage could possibly justify such a sacrifice? Time, Tara Quinn answered softly. They bought time for their civilization to prepare. They sacrificed themselves not for victory, but for the mere possibility that others might eventually win. The archive AI helpfully displayed more examples: the Alamo, Masada, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, The Last Samurai at Shiroyama. Pavlov's house in Stalingrad. Computer in galactic military history. How many recorded instances exist of forces fighting to the last individual when surrender was an option? Jack Slorn asked, dreading the answer. 17 confirmed instances across all recorded galactic military history, the computer responded. And for humans? Catalogued Earth military history contains 3,547 confirmed last stands where combatants chose certain death over surrender. Prell's skin had lost all color. That's impossible. Computer. Navex's voice was barely audible. Show us the human military concept known as a suicide mission. The display shifted again, showing Japanese kamikaze pilots, human torpedo operators, soldiers volunteering for missions with minimal survival probability. I don't understand, Jack Slorn said, genuinely bewildered. These humans, they're choosing to die. Not exactly, Tara Quinn corrected, her analytical mind finding patterns in the chaos. They're choosing what they die for. Look at their expressions. This isn't about death, it's about meaning. The footage shifted to the Battle of Mogadishu, showing outnumbered American soldiers fighting through the night against overwhelming odds. No Zenthari commander would ever authorize this mission, Jack Slorn observed. The casualty risk assessment would make it automatically disqualified. No draconian soldier would volunteer for it, Navex added. Our survival instinct is too strong. Computer, what's the human phrase for this behavior? Prell asked. The relevant human military doctrine is encapsulated in several phrases: leave no man behind, death before dishonor, last full measure of devotion, and greater love hath no man than to lay down his life for his friends. The 4 cadets sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they were witnessing. We've been studying military tactics for 3 years, Jack Slorn finally said. Every strategy we've learned is based on rational cost-benefit analysis, force preservation, tactical withdrawal when faced with superior forces. He gestured helplessly at the display. Humans don't calculate the same way we do. They fight differently. It's not just different, Nivex rumbled, his scales now pale with anxiety. It's terrifying. A species that doesn't fear death the way we do, how do you defeat an enemy like that? Computer, one more query, Tara Quinn chimed, her voice resonating with dread. During the Battle of Stalingrad we watched earlier, what percentage of human soldiers had formal military training before the conflict? Approximately 35% of Soviet forces at Stalingrad had received formal military training exceeding 3 months. The remainder were hastily trained civilians, many with less than 4 weeks of preparation. So these aren't even their professional warriors, Jack Slorn realized, horror dawning on his face. These are just ordinary humans. Their entire species fights like this. We need to see their elite forces, Prell suggested, though his tentacles trembled at the thought. Computer, show us Earth Special Operations training. As the display shifted to show human Special Forces selection courses, the room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. What they saw next would change everything. The holographic display flickered to life with footage labeled U.S. Navy SEAL Bud S training, Hell Week. The 4 cadets leaned forward, their exhaustion forgotten as they watched humans voluntarily subject themselves to what could only be described as methodical torture. What are we seeing here? Jack Slorn asked, his voice barely above a whisper. According to the database. Prell responded, tentacles dancing nervously across the interface. This is the selection process for one of Earth's elite military units. They call it Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. This particular phase is designed to eliminate candidates who lack mental fortitude. On screen, mud-covered humans carried heavy logs while instructors screamed in their faces. Sleep-deprived candidates shivered uncontrollably in freezing surf. Men who could barely stand continued to perform physical tasks well beyond reasonable endurance limits. Computer, What's the ambient temperature in that training environment? Nivex asked. Approximately 5.5 degrees Celsius in air, water temperature approximately 15 degrees Celsius. And how long do these humans go without sleep during this phase? Candidates are permitted approximately 4 hours of sleep total during a 5-day continuous training evolution. Nivex's scales rippled with disbelief. That's not possible. No sentient being can function under those conditions. Look at their faces, Tara Quinn observed, her crystalline form dimming with distress. They're suffering, but they're choosing to continue. No one is forcing them to stay. The footage shifted to show candidates ringing a brass bell. The database explained this was the signal to quit the program. The camera lingered on the faces of those who remained, their eyes hollow with exhaustion but burning with something the aliens couldn't quite identify. Computer, Jax Lorne requested, his voice strained. What percentage of candidates complete this training? Historical completion rate for BUD-S training ranges from 15 to 30%. So 70 to 85% of their strongest warriors fail this test? Prell's tentacles coiled tightly against his body. And this is voluntary? Affirmative. All special operations selection programs in human military organizations are voluntary. The display shifted to similar training programs, British selection across frozen mountains, French Foreign Legion desert survival exercises, Russian Spetsnaz hand-to-hand combat training that left participants bloodied but refusing to yield. They're creating something, Nivex rumbled, smoke puffing anxiously from his nostrils. They're deliberately breaking these humans down to rebuild them into something else. Computer, show psychological evaluations of humans who complete these special forces programs, Tara Quinn requested, her normally melodic voice discordant with worry. Data streams filled the display, psychological profiles, combat effectiveness metrics, survival rates in extreme conditions. This can't be accurate, Jax Lorne protested, his neck ridges now almost black. According to this, these humans can continue fighting effectively despite severe injuries, sleep deprivation, starvation, and psychological trauma that would incapacitate any galactic military cadet. Look at this combat footage. Prell pointed with a trembling tentacle at a video of Special Forces operators in a firefight. That human has sustained a projectile wound to his extremity, but he's applying self-treatment while continuing to direct his team. The footage shifted again, showing what the database identified as SEER training, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. The cadets watched in horrified silence as humans were subjected to simulated captivity, torture, and interrogation, all to prepare them for the possibility of becoming prisoners of war. They train for capture, Tara Quinn observed, her voice barely audible. They expect to endure pain without surrendering information. Computer, Nivex asked, his voice uncharacteristically small. In galactic military doctrine, what is the protocol for captured personnel? Standard galactic military protocol directs captured personnel to provide requested information to prevent physical harm and to ensure survival until diplomatic exchange can be arranged. And humans? The computer displayed the U.S. Military Code of Conduct. If I am captured, I will continue to resist by all means available. I will make every effort to escape and to aid others to escape. That's suicide, Jax Lorne stammered. They're trained to resist captors even when resistance means certain death. The display shifted to historical footage, HOWs in Vietnam using blink patterns to communicate covert messages while being filmed for propaganda. A captured pilot using hand gestures to communicate torture while appearing to cooperate with his captors. Tara Quinn's crystalline form began to vibrate at a frequency that indicated extreme distress. The other cadets turned to her in concern. I can't, her voice fractured into painful harmonics. I can't watch any more of this. The footage shifted to show a Special Forces field medical procedure, a soldier performing emergency surgery on his own leg to remove shrapnel, using only a combat knife and no anesthesia. With a sound like breaking glass, Tara Quinn abruptly stood, her crystalline form flashing crimson distress patterns. "These aren't tactics," she cried, her voice splintering into discordant tones. "This is madness." "Tara Quinn, we need to complete the assignment," Jax Lorne said, though his own voice wavered with uncertainty. "Don't you understand what we're seeing?" she demanded, gesturing at the display where humans continued to demonstrate their capacity for enduring the unendurable. These creatures have evolved to embrace suffering. They don't just tolerate pain, they use it as a forge. They deliberately seek out the worst conditions imaginable to transform themselves. Droplets of luminescent fluid, the Lumidian equivalent of tears, fell from her crystalline form, splattering on the floor with tiny musical pings. "I joined the Academy to protect our systems from threats," she said, her voice steadying though the tears continued to fall. "But if these humans ever decided to fight us, what could we possibly do against creatures who think like this?" Without waiting for an answer, she turned and walked out of the archive room, leaving a trail of glimmering teardrops behind her. The three remaining cadets sat in stunned silence, the human special forces footage continuing to play before them. None of them moved to stop it, though their expressions showed they all understood exactly why Tara Quinn had left. "Maybe," Prell finally suggested, his voice barely audible, "we should skip ahead to their actual battlefield performance. How these special forces operate in real combat situations." Jax Lorne nodded numbly, but as the computer began to display the requested footage, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to discover something even more disturbing about humanity's capacity for warfare. Dawn was breaking over the Academy's eastern spires by the time the three remaining cadets emerged from the archives. Their eyes were bloodshot, or in Nivex's case, an alarming shade of orange, and they moved with the sluggish coordination of beings who had witnessed something fundamentally disturbing. "We should get some rest before compiling the report," Prell suggested, his usually animated tentacles hanging limply. "I don't think I can sleep," Jax Lorne admitted. "Not after what we've seen." "Nor I," rumbled Nivex. "Let's just finish this." They made their way to an empty study pod in the Academy's main hall. The morning light filtered through the crystal dome above, casting rainbow patterns that seemed inappropriately cheerful. Jax Lorne pulled up a blank report template on the holographic display. "So what exactly do we tell Captain Desaria?" Prell extended a tentacle toward the interface, then hesitated. "I'm not sure we should include everything we saw." "What do you mean?" Nivex asked. "Think about it." Prell's voice dropped to a whisper, though no other cadets were nearby. "If we report that humans are potentially the most psychologically resilient warriors in the known galaxy, what happens next? The Academy would want to study them more closely, maybe even make contact." "You think we should lie?" Jax Lorne's neck ridges darkened with concern. "Not lie," Prell clarified. "Just emphasize their technological limitations. Downplay the psychological factors. Convince the Academy that humans aren't worth further attention." Nivex exhaled a small plume of smoke. "You're suggesting we protect them, and from us." "Or you us from them," Prell countered. "I've never seen anything like what we watched last night. Those weren't just soldiers, they were something else entirely." Jax Lorne stared at the blank report template, conflicted. Captain Desaria assigned this project for a reason. She must already know about humans. If we submit an incomplete analysis, she'll fail us, Nivex finished the thought, possibly expel us from the Academy. A heavy silence fell over the study pod. "We tell the truth," Jax Lorne finally decided. "All of it. Whatever happens next isn't our responsibility." "Agreed," Nivex rumbled. "I won't compromise my honor, even if what we've discovered is unsettling." Prell's skin rippled with reluctant acceptance. "The others will think we're exaggerating. Or worse, that we've gone space mad." "Then let them laugh," Jax Lorne said, beginning to type. We know what we saw. For the next 3 hours, they compiled their findings into the most disturbing military analysis any of them had ever created. They included everything: the scale of human conflicts, their psychological resilience, their capacity for self-sacrifice, and most alarmingly, their ability to adapt their tactics with terrifying speed. Should we include a threat assessment? Nivex asked as they neared completion. Jax Lorne hesitated. Standard protocol would require it. There's nothing standard about what we've seen, Prell argued. How do you quantify the threat level of a species that views death in combat as potentially preferable to surrender? We have to try, Jax Lorne insisted, adding a new section to the report. Under potential threat level? He wrote, technological limitation is the only factor preventing humans from presenting an immediate danger to galactic stability. Their psychological warfare capacity exceeds all known species. No one's going to believe this, Prell said, reading over the final document. They'll think we're trying to get attention, or that we misinterpreted the footage. I know, Jax Lorne agreed, finalizing the report with his authentication code. But we have the video evidence to support every claim. The class presentation is in 3 hours, Nivex noted. We should prepare for significant skepticism. Jax Lorne nodded grimly. Let them laugh. Someone needs to take these humans seriously. His gaze drifted to the window, where the blue-green marble of the training planet hung in the sky, so similar to the images of Earth they'd spent the night studying. For the first time in his academic career, he found himself hoping that an assignment would be dismissed as exaggeration. Because if Captain Desaria and the Academy took their report seriously, the implications were too disturbing to contemplate. The lecture hall buzzed with the usual pre-class chatter as cadets from a dozen different species compared notes and traded Academy gossip. Jax Lorne, Prell, and Nivex huddled near the presentation platform, looking more like prisoners awaiting sentencing than students about to give an academic report. "Where's Tara Quinn?" asked Bellari, a feline Arcturian whose whiskers twitched with curiosity. "Isn't she part of your group?" "She's not feeling well," Jax Lorne replied, exchanging glances with his teammates. The door slid open with its characteristic hiss, and Captain Desaria entered. The room immediately fell silent. "Today we begin presentations on the lesser species tactical analyses," she announced without preamble. "First group, Cadets Lorne, Prell, and Nivex. Your subject, humans." As they made their way to the platform, Jax Lorne could hear the murmured jokes behind them. Primitive monkeys with projectile weapons. This should be hilarious. 10 credits says they spend the whole time talking about human waste elimination practices. I heard these humans still use combustion engines. Combustion. Jax Lorne took a deep breath as he faced the class. His neck ridges were so dark with anxiety they were practically black. Our tactical analysis of human warfare, he began, his voice steadier than he felt, has led us to a disturbing conclusion. If humans ever develop interstellar travel, they would represent the single greatest military threat the Galactic Alliance has ever encountered. A wave of laughter rippled through the lecture hall. Even Captain Desaria's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Bold opening statement, Cadet Lorne," she commented. "I assume you have evidence to support this dramatic claim?" "We do, Captain," Nivex rumbled, stepping forward to activate the holographic display. "But we must warn you, what you're about to see disturbed us deeply." The laughter grew louder. Someone in the back made a mocking sound like a terrified child. "Computer," Prell instructed, ignoring the ridicule, "play compilation Alpha 1. The display flickered to life, showing the most disturbing footage they had discovered: the Normandy landing at Omaha Beach, soldiers running directly into machine gun fire, Marines at Fallujah clearing houses room by room despite knowing explosives waited inside, Special Forces operators continuing missions despite critical injuries." The laughter died within seconds, replaced by stunned silence. These humans, Jack Lorne explained, his voice tight with remembered horror, display a psychological resilience to combat conditions that defies rational explanation. They continue fighting in circumstances where any reasonable tactical assessment would call for retreat or surrender. NIVEX advanced the footage to show Navy SEAL training. Their elite warriors voluntarily subject themselves to conditions that would qualify as torture under galactic law. They deliberately push beyond normal biological limits to forge themselves into more effective killing machines. But this can't be real, called out a Vesperian cadet, her wing cases buzzing with agitation. You've manipulated this footage. I assure you, it's authentic, Prell responded, his tentacles gesturing precisely. The computer displays source verification. The AI confirmed the authenticity of all footage, silencing the objection. Jack Lorne continued, growing more confident as he saw the impact their presentation was having. In our analysis, we identified 7 unique psychological characteristics that make humans exceptional warriors. The display shifted to their findings. 1. Pain tolerance. Humans can continue functioning despite injuries that would incapacitate most species. 2. Psychological resilience. They adapt to extreme stress and trauma with remarkable speed. 3. Sacrifice mentality. They routinely risk or surrender their lives for abstract concepts like freedom or country. 4. Vengeful persistence. When attacked, they respond with disproportionate force and determination. 5. Pack bonding. They form unusually strong attachments to their combat units, fighting harder to protect comrades than to preserve themselves. 6. Adaptability. They modify tactics and technology with exceptional creativity. 7. Spite. They will continue fighting even when defeat is certain, simply to inflict maximum damage on their enemy. In conclusion, NIVEX rumbled, humans don't think about warfare the way we do. They don't calculate acceptable losses or surrender when the odds become unfavorable. They just keep fighting. The lecture hall had grown so quiet that the ventilation system seemed deafening by comparison. Faces that had been mocking minutes earlier now showed expressions ranging from disbelief to horror. Finally, a Quasirian cadet broke the silence. But they're primitive. They barely have space travel. Their weapons are centuries behind ours. Technologically, yes, Jack Lorne agreed. But psychologically? They're unlike anything in our military doctrine. Imagine, Prell added quietly, if these humans had our technology, our ships, our weapons, but retained their mindset. A visible shudder ran through the audience. Captain Desaria had remained silent throughout the presentation, her compound eyes unreadable. Now she rose from her seat and approached the platform. Computer, she ordered, display classification QGX-17A. The hologram changed to show an official Galactic Security Council document. Its heading read, Species Containment Protocol, Earth Humans. This, Captain Desaria said, her voice deadly serious, is why we monitor Earth. This is why, despite having observed them for centuries, the Council has voted unanimously to prevent human integration into the galactic community. She turned to face the stunned class. What these cadets have shown you isn't their entire homework assignment. It's the reason we maintain a quarantine zone around the Sol system. The reason we redirect their space probes and scramble their deep space transmissions. She clicked a control on her wrist, bringing up new footage, what appeared to be an illegal recording of a closed council session. You humans, said a dignified Centaurian in the recording, are the only species we've encountered who became more aggressive after developing nuclear weapons. Not less. They're the only species whose military doctrine includes the concept of acceptable casualties among their own population. They're the only species who, upon discovering a superior force, would likely attack rather than submit. Captain Desaria froze the recording and faced the silent classroom. This wasn't just an academic exercise, cadets. This was your introduction to the most closely guarded secret in galactic security. Earth isn't merely a primitive world. It's the only world in known space that the Council has unanimously voted to contain indefinitely. By the following morning, the Academy administration was dealing with an unprecedented situation. 17 cadets, just over half the class, had submitted formal resignation papers. The official reason given by most was reconsideration of career path, but everyone knew the truth. They'd seen something that fundamentally changed their understanding of warfare, and by extension, their place in the universe. Jax Lorne sat alone in the observatory dome, watching the stars and thinking about a small blue planet that was deliberately being kept isolated from the galactic community. He didn't hear Captain Desaria approach until she was standing beside him. "You didn't resign," she observed, her mandibles clicking softly. "No, Captain." "May I ask why?" Jax Lorne considered the question for a moment. "Because if humans ever do break quarantine, the galaxy will need officers who understand what they're dealing with." Captain Desaria made a sound that might have been approval. 17 resignations. That's actually fewer than last year. Jax Lorne looked up in surprise. "You mean this happens every time?" "Every year," she confirmed. "That's the real purpose of this class, Cadet Lorne. Not to study lesser species, but to identify which officer candidates have the psychological fortitude to face the truth about humans." She settled her massive form next to him, gazing out at the stars. "The Council has been maintaining the quarantine for over 300 years. In that time, humans have fought 2 world wars, developed nuclear weapons, spliced genes, created artificial intelligence, and begun exploring their solar system. Their technological progress is concerning." "How long can we keep them contained?" Jax Lorne asked. "That's the question that keeps the Council awake at night," she admitted. "Earth's resources are finite. Their population continues to grow. Eventually, they'll need to expand beyond their system. And when that happens?" Captain Desaria's compound eyes reflected the starlight. "That's why we need officers like you, who've seen the truth and chosen to remain anyway. The common assumption is that when primitive species join the galactic community, we help civilize them. With humans—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The fear isn't that they'll fail to adapt to galactic society. The fear is that they'll transform it." She stood, towering over him. "Imagine human psychological resilience combined with our technology. Imagine their special forces with access to our weapons. Imagine their generals commanding our fleets." Jax Lorne shuddered. "They'd be unstoppable." "Precisely. And here's what truly terrifies the Council. In every simulation we've run, when humans eventually discover they've been deliberately contained, their response isn't to negotiate or submit." She clicked her mandibles grimly. "It's to declare war against the entire galactic community, regardless of the odds." "Would they have any chance of winning such a war?" Jax Lorne asked quietly. Captain Desaria's silence was answer enough. As she left him alone with his thoughts, Jax Lorne turned back to the stars, imagining a species of warriors who viewed impossible odds as merely a challenge to overcome, who treated death in battle as preferable to surrender, who forged themselves in suffering and emerged stronger. Somewhere out there, on a small blue planet, humans continued their relentless evolution, unaware that an entire galactic civilization watched them with a mixture of fascination and dread, hoping they would never have to discover which was stronger, advanced alien technology or the indomitable human spirit of warfare. Based on what he'd seen, Jax Lorne had his suspicions, and for the first time in his life, he found himself afraid of the stars.